I'm SVV Art, a full-time self-employed artist, sculptor, and small business owner. A few days ago, I gave my Instagram followers the chance to ask me anything, and I received a lot of questions. Let's answer a bunch of them whilst I paint a picture of my character, Spiky. First up, Come Join Us asks, what's the origin of your username? If I'm being honest, I wish the story behind my username was a bit more interesting than it actually is. Throughout my years of being an artist, I've cycled through more usernames than I can count, eventually changing them once they no longer suited my art style. This routine continued up until about 2020, when, yet again, I wanted another rebrand. At the time, my art account was Sudsy Valentine, which, oh my god, it makes me cringe, but this username no longer suited my art style. So, using the S and the V from Sudsy Valentine, I created a new art account called SVV Art, and that's kind of it. SVV Art was meant to be a placeholder name whilst I thought of something better, but as I posted more and more, the name eventually stuck. And actually, nowadays, I really like the simplicity of my username. It's quite nice to just be known as SVV sometimes, and I can hide my signature within my work really easily. Next up, Marwa Apple Pie asks, are you planning on ever doing a face reveal? If you've been following me for any length of time, you'll know that I do not show my face online. And to be honest, I plan on keeping it that way. Revealing who I am and what I look like could form a deeper connection between me and my audience, but to be honest, I genuinely feel that lifting the veil at this time would only make things more stressful. For starters, I have a big following, with over 600,000 followers across my social media channels. So even though I'm fairly happy with how I look and I have good self-esteem, the thought of having hundreds of thousands of people potentially judging my appearance is just something I do not need in my life. Plus, we have all seen how harsh and blatantly rude parts of the internet can be, especially when it comes to people's looks. Other than the potential mental toll it might have on me, I also feel like showing my face online wouldn't improve my content all that much. Yes, it might be nice for you guys to see who's behind the art, but at the end of the day, when I'm filming a project or drawing a picture, you'll only see my hands anyway. So for now, I prefer to let my art do the talking. Blood Cherry Peach asks, what's your least favourite art medium? And this is an interesting question. Over the years, I have tried many different art mediums, including acrylics, alcohol markers, clay, colouring pencils, papercraft, and watercolours, just to name a few, but out of everything I've tried, I have to say my least favourite art medium is lino printmaking. To put it simply, I find the entire lino printing process to be extremely tedious. It probably doesn't help that I was consistently forced to make lino prints throughout my college art course, but slicing up a big mat of rubber just to coat it in thick, sticky ink and then press it into paper, I don't know, it just doesn't appeal to me at all. Now, this is not to say that I hate the finished results or the artists that make lino prints. They can be beautiful, and there are many fantastic creatives out there who do it really well, but personally, it's just my least favourite medium to use. Plus, the fact that one tiny mistake can ruin hours and hours of lino cutting work puts me off completely. My hatred for permanent mistakes within art is kind of what drew me to digital drawing and oil-based clay. If I make a mistake with these, I can fix it fairly easily and save my sanity. Whilst we're on the topic of art mediums, Max Walking Fish asks, what media have you never tried but want to? An art medium that I would love to try one day is pottery and ceramics, specifically on a pottery wheel. When I was in school, there was a pottery wheel in the corner of my art class for years, but we were forbidden from using it. And I mean, I understand why. Teenagers can hardly be trusted with scissors, let alone a big piece of spinning machinery. I also remember one day I went into art class and it was full of Jaffa cakes for some reason. I mean, I can see why the teacher did not want anyone turning it on. I also remember watching a creator called Ami Ceramics on YouTube back in the day. She used to make these like little animal pots, and the process looked incredibly satisfying. So yeah, I would love to give ceramics a go one day, but I should probably look into like classes or courses, since buying all of the equipment myself would probably be like way too expensive. If you have any suggestions for a total beginner like me, please leave them in the comments below. Plush Vamp asks, what made you decide to transform your art into real sculptures? And I love this question. My main main source of inspiration for giving sculpture work a go came from Colin Christian, a London-born artist best known for his sculpture work. For literal years, I dreamt of creating my own wall-hanging resin faces, but the process always really intimidated me. It wasn't until I watched a relatively simple YouTube video, however, that I finally bit the bullet. Now, I cannot remember what the title of this video was called, which is so frustrating, but the premise was simple. If you're an artist that only works digitally, which I did at the time, you will benefit massively from having a separate workspace for offline, hands-on creating. Think of it this way: the fast-paced, instant gratification of digital art stimulates one side of your brain, but the slower, hands-on, mistake-filled process of sculpting, painting, or drawing stimulates a different part of your brain entirely, giving the other half a rest. With this newfound desire to create more tactile 3D artwork, I finally decided to create the sculptures that I had wanted to make for so long, and as a result, taking longer breaks from constant internet dopamine quickly improved my day-to-day creativity. Sculpting with my hands was almost therapeutic after so many years of digital art. On to the next question. Now, I can't tell if this is an I or an L, but I'm gonna go with an L. Or maybe an I don't know. Iona is 25 Real asks, any advices about getting into a new medium like you did with sculpture? If you're wanting to try out an art medium that you have zero experience in, I have 3 pieces of advice for you. Firstly, do as much research as possible before buying any new art supplies. It's all too common for artists to discover a new medium, purchase all of the best materials, and then promptly get discouraged by a tricky or confusing process that they didn't anticipate. Using my sculpture work as an example, I made sure to do tons of research before spending any money on supplies. YouTube sculpting tutorials and forums about mold making really helped me to understand exactly what I did and did not need to get started. Learning the sculpture process from start to finish before buying supplies saved me lots of money in the beginning. Once you've done your research, my second piece of advice is to start small and start cheap. If you've decided to finally give a new art medium a go, but you're not 100% certain that you will enjoy it, give it a go using a smaller quantity of cheaper materials first. Let's use acrylic paints as an example. If I was a painting beginner and I decided to give acrylics a go, buying the most expensive set of professional paints and paintbrushes is a terrible idea. Sure, there's a chance I could find a passion for painting and use these materials for years, but for a beginner, it's much more likely that I would just get discouraged and give up. And finally, once you've researched the medium and bought all of your supplies, give it a really good go. Too many artists get discouraged when their skill level doesn't match what they see in their mind, but this is a very natural part of art. As frustrating as it is, you have to be bad at something in order to become good at it, and the best way to improve is by learning from your mistakes. Speaking of messing up and making mistakes, it's Chanya0 wants to know, what is the hardest part about doing these projects? I find the hardest part of any sculpture project is the mold making process. Each part of a well-made mold takes time, skill, and very accurate measuring to get right. Plus, since you're dealing with a bunch of materials that cure fairly quickly, if you make a mistake, you've wasted lots of money. I find the resin jacket of a glove mold particularly annoying to create, as the materials needed for this part more often than not require extremely good ventilation. And this is fine if you have a dedicated outdoor studio, for example, but my studio space is in a spare bedroom. This then creates a really annoying roadblock for my mold making process, as I have to wait for decent weather in order to work outside. And if you live in the UK, you know that is not a common occurrence. On to the next. Naya asks, I've tried to find my style and hate every attempt, but I can't figure out what to change. Any tips? This is a great question that I'm sure many artists can relate to, but I really wish that more artists would focus on developing their style instead of just finding it. Finding your art style sounds like you'll magically come across it one day, like finding, I don't know, a key to a treasure chest, but this could not be further from the truth. An artist's style is simply an amalgamation of lessons and inspirations that they have learnt and then applied to their own work, typically over a very long period of time. This is also why looking back at your old art can make you cringe, as you've learnt so much since then. Parts of my art style, like minimal shading, white pupils, and floating heads, came from a ton of trial and error. I would try new things, take note of what I enjoyed about that, and then add those features to my next drawings. I didn't just wake up one day and find my art style. It took many years of development. I highly recommend looking through your own artwork and pinpointing the parts that you like the most. Which parts were the most fun to draw? Were there any bits that you found like tedious or difficult? This self-reflection can really help you to switch things up and focus on the fun. For example, if you hate drawing detailed hair, just try making it look more stylized next time. Or if you have a tendency to add thick, bold outlines to your line art, experiment with that a little bit more. At the end of the day, your art style should feel natural and free-flowing. It just takes a whole lot of trial and error to get to that point. You've probably also heard of the phrase steal like an artist, and this is a great mindset to have when developing your own style. Stealing like an artist means taking inspiration from something and making it your own. There is no such thing as a completely original art style. Every single artist and creative has taken inspiration from someone or something. All artwork is derivative. There is an important caveat to this, however. If you are going to take inspiration from another artist or creative, you must ensure that it is exactly that, inspiration. Copying ideas one-to-one is a huge no-no within the art community. So if you find yourself simply copying other people's work and passing it off as your own, you are doing it wrong. Okay, whilst we're on the topic of art styles, Monsoonish asks, when do you feel you really developed your style? Like I mentioned before, developing my own art style has been a very long-winded journey, but it wasn't until I started to follow the advice that I have just given you that I started to genuinely like how my art was looking, and I was now focusing on the fun. After a few years of drawing fan art, I slowly began to realize there were parts of my drawing process that I simply did not enjoy anymore. One of these made-up art rules that I was blindly following was line art. I would create a sketch, lower the opacity, and then create a crisp, clean line art over the top. This could then be coloured in underneath. I've since realised, however, that I was doing this just because I thought you had to. Every digital art speed paint or time-lapse I watched at the time featured the same line art process, and sure, it made my fan art look nice and consistent, but I still found it extremely tedious. So, in late 2021, I stopped making clean line art layers and I found a method that worked for me. Instead of using a sketch as a line art guide, I now used my sketch as the line art, and then I painted on top. Painting on top allowed me to clean up any lines and alter the drawing however I needed to. I was no longer bound by a precise line art layer that had taken me hours to draw. After taking this initial step, I quickly became selfish with my art. For example, I found drawing bodies really boring, so I stopped. I also found detailed backgrounds tiring and difficult, so I stopped those too. Over time, these new selfish decisions made my drawing process more fun, which then made me genuinely like how my art was looking, which then made my art style develop naturally. By the way, if you're enjoying my content, please consider subscribing. You guys smashed my 50,000 subscriber goal in just 6 days, which has absolutely it's blown my mind. I cannot thank you all enough. Things seem to be moving fairly quickly now too, so my new subscriber goal is 75,000. And if we reach this number, I think I'll host a giveaway to celebrate. What would you like to win? Jolapom wants to know 3 random facts about me. Okay, let me have a think. Fact number 1, I love raw salmon. Like in sushi or poke bowls, but I find cooked salmon disgusting. The smell and the taste make me feel so sick. I hate it. Fact number 2, my favourite bugs are beetles, specifically stag beetles and Hercules beetles. I think my love for these has stemmed from the many hours I spent late night island bug hunting in Animal Crossing New Leaf. If you know, you know. And fact number 3, I have a huge phobia of injections and needles, so much so that even mentioning them makes me feel like sharp, pricking sensations on my arms and legs. Like I'm having my blood drawn or something. Oh my god, it's so bad. Okay, let's move on before I throw up. Bernellian asks, aside from creating lovely artwork, thank you very much, do you have any other hobbies? Okay, now this is kind of a tricky one to answer because I am a self-confessed workaholic. I enjoy my job so much that I constantly find myself creating art and content even on my days off. This does mean that I work 24/7, but I honestly don't mind. I thoroughly enjoy it. hobbies. Aside from creating art and working, however, my other hobby involves collecting things like art books, keychains, trinkets, and stickers. There is a distinct theme across my collection, as I love almost anything mascot or cartoon character related. My favorite characters to collect include Peko-chan, Domo, Tamagotchis, Kobito Dukan, Pikmin, and Doraemon. You can't really miss Doraemon, he is a bit big. So yeah, other than like collecting things and working, I don't really have any other hobbies. Is that sad? Anyway, next question. Tater the Tots asks, how long does it usually take to create a single art piece, such as a sculpture or digital? Even though I've been doing it for like a long period of time, I'm still fairly new to the sculpture process, which means I'm much slower at making them than I'd like to be. Sticky, my first resin sculpture, took 5 months to complete, and trinkets took almost 8 months. I know this sounds like an absurd amount of time for a project like this, but I wasn't working on them like flat out full time. I did have other commitments like shop updates or commissions and other general life stuff in between. This being said, with my newfound knowledge, I am fairly confident that the next sculpture will take a fraction of the time that my previous ones took. When it comes to my digital art, on the other hand, my floating head portraits typically take anywhere from 2 to 8 hours to complete. They used to consistently take me 12 hours to finish, but I've managed to find quicker methods that work for me and streamline my process. Speaking of which, Maya JJ Roman asks, what is your drawing process? If I break it down into steps, my drawing process goes as follows. First, I use a soft round brush to create an initial sketch. Then I refine my sketch, erasing messy areas and line edges. After a bunch of refining and rearranging, my sketch now becomes my line art, so I can start to colour underneath on a new layer. Once all of my colours are in place, I then create a layer above my sketch or line art and paint over everything. I also have a habit of using like a million different layers when drawing, because I'm terrified of losing progress if I've painted a mistake on top of everything permanently. And finally, once my drawing is almost complete, sboat.er wants to know, what are some final touches you put on your art? My go-to finishing touches that I like to add are halftone, chromatic aberration, and of course, my signature. The combination of halftone and chromatic aberration adds a really nice texture to the colours within my work. It really makes everything look a bit more visually appealing. And of course, no artwork is ready for the internet without a signature. I personally try to hide my signature like within my artwork, so that lazy art thieves and reposters can get caught out easily. Next up, It's Just Jart asks, what are your favourite brushes in Procreate? I really want to know. Great question. Let's run through my very small selection of Procreate brush favourites. Firstly, my holy grail brushes have to be Mattes Painting Sharper and Mattes Painting Soft from Mattes Painting Brush Set for Photoshop. These brushes were made to mimic gouache paints, but they're also perfect for general illustrations and sketches. Also, this specific set was made for Photoshop, but I imported them into Procreate anyway, because it seemed to work fine. Mattes Painting Sharper is an opaque brush with a slightly textured edge. When layering colours on top of one another, this textured edge blends together layers much nicer than like a solid circle brush would. Mattes Painting Soft is almost the same as its sharper alternative, except this brush has pen pressure opacity. This is my absolute favourite brush for sketching and outlining, as it's super satisfying to draw with and layer up. Aside from these two brushes, I've been really enjoying Procreate Soft Brush and 6B Pencil. The Soft Brush is a super simple pen pressure gradient, and I consistently use this for blush and light shading. It is so useful. And as for the 6B Pencil, even though I'm not the biggest fan of heavily textured brushes, this thin scratchy brush looks great when it's layered over bright colours. Okay, that's it for my main brushes, but for more detailed areas such as hair, braids and partings, I swear by these brushes by Vigalia. If you draw black or natural hairstyles often, these tools will speed up your workflow tenfold. I'll leave the links to all of these brushes in the description below. TV Thing asks, what artist or artists influenced you the most? Other than Colin Christian, who I mentioned earlier, Anna Katish, Jamie Hewlett, and Yoshito Minara are probably my biggest inspirations. Anna Katish is an illustrator that I have adored for years. Her use of bold colours, cell shading, and plain backgrounds has influenced my work in many ways. Also, there's something extremely appealing about the way that she draws lips. I've always loved them. Jamie Hewlett is a comic comic book artist, best known for illustrating the band members of Gorillaz and Tank Girl. I discovered Jamie's work when I was in secondary school and I have admired it ever since. His art is super recognisable, and I'd love to own one of his art books one day. And last but certainly not least, I cannot possibly discuss art inspirations without mentioning Yoshitomo Nara. I remember my sister having Yoshitomo Nara postcards on her bedroom wall when we were younger, and I used to think that they were so cool. Nara's work is so playful and unique. Also, a couple of days ago, I actually visited Yoshitomo Nara's latest exhibit at the Hayward Gallery in London. Seeing his work in person felt so surreal, as I've loved it for so many years. My favourite piece from the entire exhibit has to be this sculpture called Fountain of Life. Watching these tiny little faces cry real tears was so beautiful. Next up, RGA Rat XV asks, what motivates you to create art but for your career as well? This might sound weird, but the number one thing that motivates me the most is remembering my time as a waitress. Now, there is absolutely nothing wrong with being a waitress, but for me personally, the thought of going back to that almost scares me into working harder. My dream job is what I'm doing right now, and there is nothing else I'd rather do. Working hard keeps me doing what I love. And finally, the pile.jpg asks, what projects do you dream of working on in the future? Something I've dreamt about doing for ages is having a solo exhibition for my artwork and now my sculptures. It would probably take ages to make enough work for a show, but it would still be super cool. Also, creating and selling my very own SVV art toys would also be amazing, but the process for this is extremely expensive and time-consuming. I have toyed with the idea of making a Kickstarter, but I have no idea where to begin with this. If anyone has any advice or experience with this, please reach out. Okay, that's all of the questions that I'm going to answer for today. Thank you so much for your submissions. If there's anything in particular that you'd like me to talk about that I didn't talk about today, feel free to leave it in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. I mean it when I say I will host a giveaway for 75,000 subscribers. You guys are the best. Right, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.